Our guest this morning is no stranger to Louisianians. She is a wife, mother, and educator, and she just happens to be the First Lady of Louisiana. We are pleased and honored to welcome Miss Donna Edwards all the way from the capital city, Baton Rouge, to the OPT network for the very first time. Mrs. Edwards, good morning and welcome.
Well, good morning. Thank you so much for having me on your show this morning.
It's our pleasure. But so here's where we want to start, Mrs. Edwards. We want to rewind back to you and your husband in high school, being high school sweethearts. Tell us about that time.
Well, so my parents, my dad worked for an international paper company, and so we moved around about every 4 years. And so we landed in Amite, Louisiana when I was in the sixth grade. And so I met him, and, he was one of 8 children. So he had, his mom had 8 kids in 10 years. So you pretty much knew the Edwards boys, and the oldest was their daughter was the oldest. But anyway, so I had the 2 brothers that were closer to my age were in junior high, which was John Bell and his brother Daniel. So anyway, I knew them in junior high. And then in high school, he asked me out, of course, and we became girlfriend and boyfriend. And so as he was a year older than me, so he graduated, went on to West Point, and then I graduated the next year, went to University of Southern Mississippi in Hattiesburg. And then after he got out of West Point in 1988 and went to Ranger School, we got married, and that was in March 4th. Actually, we just celebrated our 30th wedding anniversary.
Congratulations!
Thank you. And then at the end of March, we were headed to Schofield Barracks, Hawaii. So
let me stop you right there.
Okay.
So he goes to West Point, and you go to school in Mississippi.
Yes.
And so, how do you keep the fire burning? How do you keep that together?
Well, what is the statement?
Absence.
Absence makes the heart grow fonder. So, back in that time, as you probably remember, we didn't have cell phones, or we didn't talk very often, and we both. So
you had to write letters.
You had to write letters, and so you read your letters over and over every day, the same letter. And so he was the best letter writer. He always wrote the nicest and longest letters, and so there was a lot of letter writing going on. And on Sunday evenings, that's when we would typically, call each other. He would call me. I think there was one phone in his company, in his barracks. And then, long distance costs money, so you didn't call very often. And so we would talk maybe once or twice a month. And then most of the time we would write letters. That's right.
Wow. No unlimited calling back in that day. That's right. and so when do you know that he is the one that you will marry?
We grew up together, and we just always, I guess when he steps, even at that time when he walked into the room, or when I saw him, in your heart, you have that flutter in your heart, your stomach kind of gets in a knot. Even after all those years, then you kind of know. Mm-hmm. You just know, and when you still have that spark, and it's still to this day. I'll if I haven't seen him for a long time, or we've been distant, you still get that little butterfly.
Amazing, and good to hear. Good to hear.
Yeah.
And so he joins the military company, and you move to Hawaii, and you start as a servant to the United States. So at what point does he say to you, after his military service has ended, honey, I think I'm going to run for the governor of the state of Louisiana?
Well, he never said that.
Okay.
No, so we spent 8 years in the military, ended up with Fort Bragg, where he was a company commander. You typically, command a company for a year or maybe a little bit more, but he ended up almost 2 years company commander. John Bell was always, even in the military, he was a general's aide. At one point, he always seemed to rise to the top in whatever he was doing. Same in school, same at West Point. He was even at West Point, he was on the vice president of the Honor Society, the club there that really managed the honesty and integrity part of West Point. And so in the military, we had Samantha, and our oldest. You probably know the story, but she was born with spina bifida. So, in the military, a military wife you're on your own quite a bit, because your husbands are off training. And so he was gone quite a bit training. And even if he was, at Fort Bragg at that time, we had our second daughter. But Samantha had a lot of medical issues at that time, and of course we had Sarah Ellen now, and we came home for a football game to LSU, and on the drive back, I was pregnant with our second. He said, I miss home. I think I'm ready to go back. And so I said, it was up to him, and so he started studying for the LSAT while still in the military, and so we came home the summer of 1995. He got accepted to LSU Law School, started law school for 3 years, clerked for a judge in New Orleans, came back, started his practice in Amite. And for the next 8 years, we really served our community. He was part of the Knights of Columbus, the Kiwanis Club. I joined Junior Auxiliary, became president, PTO, church community. So we really served our community at that point. And then after about 8 years, he was asked, the current representative, it was term limited. So the people in the community said, we want you to run for this position. And so he did. He ran. And for the next 8 years. And so we had military 8 years, community service for 8 years, his district as state representative for 8 years, and now as governor, hopefully another 4 years.
So 8 seems to be the number.
Yeah, right. So we got to complete that.
So let me take you back a little bit to Samantha and having a baby born with spina bifida. And one of the things that you blogged about was faith. And that seems to be certainly something that resonates through your life and through your family. Talk about what happens when you have a child that is born with spina bifida and you not really understanding what that will mean and the uncertainties that could bring.
Well, yes, you absolutely rely on your faith. And, when you put a Southern girl 1,000 miles away from mama and you just, and you're there all alone and you're relying on your neighbors. But our faith was always there, but it absolutely was just strengthened without a doubt during that time. There wasn't Google back then, so we really didn't understand, or I didn't understand at the age of 25, fairly young lady at that time, what we were about to go through. But the doctor there had encouraged me to abort.
He had encouraged you to abort.
And
what did you say? What did you say when he says that, this pregnancy might not be viable and there are going to be some challenges? What do you say at that moment?
Oh, I became mute. I said nothing. I didn't know what to say. For someone, you probably don't obviously know me very well, but I'm a very big talker and I'm pretty strong in all my convictions. And I just became just total silent, and I didn't know what to think. So I left that doctor's office by myself. In fact, they wanted to have somebody come drive me home because John Bell was off in one of his missions. So,
So you're left to deal with this news and this big decision by yourself.
Yeah. And so, it was even hard to explain. I didn't know how to explain it. I didn't know what we were about to go through. And the doctor, just said, I just want to give you the worst case scenario. And he did. I have forgiven him for all that. But, I think he did what he thought he had to do at that point. And so, right, I don't know the time, but I know we had, they brought John Bell back from wherever he was training back pretty soon. So I remember picking him up from the airport and then telling him everything that, and we already had doctor's appointments set up the afternoon. And so I remember picking him up and telling him everything. And he says, he shook his head. He goes, no, we're not going to do that. And
we're not going to abort.
We're not going to abort. We're not going to do that. That's not who we are. And I said, I don't want to, I felt like I was at the mercy of the doctor at that point. I just didn't know what to say or whatever. And it was almost like God just took that situation, and we went to the next 2 or 3 doctors who were another OBGYN, a specialist in that area, neurosurgeon. And it's like everything was positive. Look at her move. Look at her kick. Oh, my goodness, and she may have some problems with her lower extremities, but she will probably be able to walk with braces. And it just like God just opened up this positive cloud that just followed me for the rest of my pregnancy, truly. And so it was that faith. You lean strongly on your faith and your trust in God at that point. And we were ready. And the thing that I really, out of all this that I promote, so I took a test called the Alphafetoprotein.
Hold that thought. Hold that thought.
Yeah.
We're going to take a quick break here, but when we come back, we're going to talk about that test, and we're going to talk about faith and how it has been the motif in your life and the way that you do the job as First Lady of Louisiana. You were talking about that moment in time where it seemed uncertain about one of your pregnancies, your daughter Samantha. It all turned out well, but there's something very important in sharing the story that you want mothers, expectant mothers, to know, and that is what?
Well, I was talking about the Alphafetoprotein test, and it's a lot of women turn that test down. One, if it's elevated, it shows as a neurotube defect, which that was the issue with Samantha. The other end, it shows a Down syndrome, which I've had both turn out. Our second, third showed possible Down syndrome. But it's so important because I really believe with God just lined it up for me without a doubt. But because of that Alphafetoprotein test, I was able to watch her, while I was still pregnant, make sure that she didn't develop hydrocephalus in the womb. We had doctors lined up as soon as she was delivered. I had a C-section, which ironically enough, my water burst that day. So I almost knew that I knew that was going to be her birthday anyway. But, you have a C-section, you have doctors lined up that took her right into surgery. Everything was lined up. Had I not had that Alphafetoprotein and had delivered her, naturally, then I don't know what would have happened to her with her legs and her lower extremities. And, the fact that the doctors were there and were able to take care of her right away. And she wasn't in the rural hospital where I was planning on having her. We ended up going to Honolulu. But it's such an important test because it really, like I said, I feel like God lined it all up for me. Because of that test, I think it saved her and she walks fine and she has hardly any problems. She's, graduated at the top of her class and president's list and all those wonderful things, has her master's. So, she's done very well. And I just want to promote that one test is really very important.
Absolutely. And so you grow your family, and then your husband had not been a stranger to public service. Then he runs for governor, and you all become the first family of Louisiana. How then do you carve out? Now, volunteerism is something that is certainly not anything that's not new to you. How do you carve out where you will go and where you will place your influence and your time?
Well, so that once again, faith, right? And my trust in God. But I really didn't have, who would have thought I never thought about being First Lady. I remember, well, first of all, 2016 was a tough year, period. We had the inauguration, which was in itself, multiple weddings planning at one time. It was unbelievable. And then our daughter got married actually that May. And then we had a flood in North Louisiana in March. And then we had the shooting in June and July here in Baton Rouge. And then we had another flood, August of 2016, and actually we moved out of the mansion for a few months while we did the repairs here. So anyway, during that time, people would meet with me. And I was remembering, and I'll be honest, there was a time when I ended up going to the doctor because I thought something was wrong with me. I would literally come in and stare at my computer and would work the whole day and feel like I had done nothing. I was in overload and didn't realize it, with everything that was happening, trying to adjust to the family, the life and everything. But so people started coming to me and asking me to look at their, whatever it was that they were passionate about. And so it was overwhelming at first, to be honest with you. I didn't know which direction I wanted to go. And so I just really prayed about it. And God just really put me on some direct paths. And still to this day, I'm just surprised every day how things just kind of fall into line. But one of them was I was a former music teacher. And so I knew I wanted to, when I left my position, that that music teacher didn't get replaced. It was replaced by something else. And I thought, how sad that we are, in Louisiana, our kids are not educated as a whole child. And that would be core subjects, but also, the music, art, and movement. Some of our schools are struggling financially. And so, you see PE morphed into recess. I even have schools that take the time walking between classes as time for their PE to check off the box. And it saddened me. And so I started something called Teach Ma'am, which is, I used to say in the military and Southern, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, thank you, ma'am, teach, ma'am. And so I thought it was really neat that it has the music and the art and the movement. So really trying to promote that in our state. At one time when, John Bell first came into office, he came into a $2 billion deficit. And the first year, he didn't cut higher ed at all, not because he had any money, because he made it a priority. And I say to our superintendents and our principals, make it a priority in your schools so that we're educating the whole child. So I really was passionate about that. And really, it started all about children, because I feel like it starts and ends with children and everything. And so I was approached by the foster care with the DCFS, Marquita Walters, and some other people that were working with foster children.
But before we move into foster care, I want to stay with music, because at one time when you and I were growing up, it was a class. You knew Absolutely. That you were going to take music. Now you transitioned from a business major into a music major.
Well, I went back to school and became certified in the classroom, but because I had enough music background, I've played piano all my life and I've done plays and stuff all my life. They allowed me to teach music in elementary level.
Mm-hmm. So talk about why music is so important for especially the younger children.
Well, we know all the data out there. There's so much that supports this, but we know that music and art really enhance the other core subjects. I mean, music goes right along with math if you understand how music works and math. And, to have, with so much joy when teaching kindergarten and first grade how to read music. And so that was really one of my goals. I ran my class much like a regular classroom teacher. So I had centers. So I had, the computer center where they played music games, and I had, I had laid out a treble clef, painted it on the floor where they had bing bags where they tossed it and they had to work out these little, their notes. And so there was centers all in my room. But I felt, it's so important for our kids to have, just like athletics. Athletics are so important. They build leadership. They build teamwork. They keep kids together, organized, doing something after school. It gives them, purpose too. And so music and art does much of the same thing as athletics. And so to not focus on those and to realize that those enhance and help the other core subjects, it's just a no-brainer to me. And, we're trying to figure out how to make this available to all of our students in Louisiana, whether they have, our whole goal, our true goal will be to have a classroom that is a music teacher that's in that classroom, and an art teacher and a PE. And there are some rural areas that is just, we have to work with them with money. And so having to show them how they can make this work in the regular classroom, how to do it before school, give them ideas that they can implement music, art, movement into their core, their course, their curriculum with their students, with or without a teacher. But my goal is to have a teacher. So
now, music and arts were certainly one, but foster care is so big and so important. Let's talk about, it's not even hard to figure out how it got on your radar, but let's talk about your journey through foster care and foster children.
Well, it started, John Bell, we had some tickets to give away for the circuits that came into town in New Orleans. So he suggested that I give it to some DCFS caseworkers and some foster families and foster children. So we did. So Madeline Landrew from New Orleans and Kim Carver, he and his wife Kristen had both been involved in the foster care program. Well, I met them down there. Of course, my sister-in-law, Blair Edwards, is a juvenile court judge. And so they wanted to talk to me about fostering and foster care. So we went down there, and Secretary Marquita Walters met us and was a part of these children being there at the circus. It was a lot of fun to see the joy in their hearts and talk to some of these parents. What I was most touched by that day is I met a young man who was aging out. And at that time it was 18. And basically the state gives them papers and says, good luck. We have a 17-year-old son. And I was like, wow, can't even imagine.
What did that do to your heart when you understood that?
I really I was like, I really kind of had a hard time wrapping my brain around this. I couldn't even imagine that even happening. And in 2017, I couldn't imagine that we would just push a kid, knowing what we know about the brain development, knowing that we know a kid. I mean, a person is not even, their brain's not fully developed till they're 20-something. And so we have all of this knowledge, and to think we're pushing an 18-year-old out, no insurance, well, of course, with the Medicaid expansion, that did help these young people. But I was so impressed with his attitude and his faith. And he was telling me that. I said, well, tell me what that means, that you have no home. He said, well, right now I'm living couch to couch. He was waiting to go into school in the fall to a community college, and that was where he was going to, be in the dorm. So since then, I just found such passion in this and what we can do to help these young people. And then, of course, meeting the moms and people who have adopted is just incredible. And so, it's just been a process over the next 3 years. So we put a website together called LouisianaFosters.la.gov, where people can go and say, you may not be available to foster a child in your home, but you might be available to do some tutoring, resource, help with financial situation, help them, have programs after school, whether it be Little League baseball or football or dance class, but have some things available. So last year we were talking about there's over 4,500 kids in foster care at one time. And we realized there's about that many churches in our state.
Wow.
4,000. And we said, wow, wouldn't that be incredible? One church, one child. And so we kind of talked about that a little more. And we thought about it. If every church would recruit one family within their church to go through the process of adopting a child, and then the church wraps themselves around that family, whether they help, give them a break during the week, babysit. And we have churches already doing this. This is happening in New Orleans and Covington and Shreveport, all over Lafayette. Churches are doing this. And we don't have to reinvent the wheel. It's already there. They just have to reach out to us. But make this, if we did that, if every church would take in one, recruit the one family to take in the one child or the siblings, we could really change the direction of a child's life, of that community, and really of our state, if we would all come together and do this.
Powerful. And one of the other things that you have focused your attention on is human trafficking. Yes. Now, when we think of human trafficking, we think that's not happening in our state, which is certainly a misnomer. Talk about why and how it is happening right here in Louisiana.
Well, to be honest, when I first heard of human trafficking, I had no clue I was like, when they told me about it, I had no clue what that was, what that entailed, what it was about. And I remember the first time the Father Jeff Bahi came and told me about it. A lot of the things that were said, I just had a hard time just even listening to. It was just so graphic and just so hard to understand, and couldn't believe this was happening. And I remember it just so happened I was having about 100 ladies come from our hometown. Catholic daughters would come in. We were having a reception for them. And so we had a few of the ladies who were going to open up Metanoia Manor at the time. Some sisters from Hospital Sisters of Mercy. And Father, we're going to explain to them about human trafficking. And I thought to myself, they're never going to understand this. They're never going to believe this. This isn't our small town. That week.
In your small town of Amite.
They were going to come here to the mansion, and we were going to give them a little reception and talk to them about human trafficking. So that very week, a young girl was discovered in our hometown. She was in a dog cage, being trafficked by her own family for drugs, of course. She was autistic. And so it became a real life scenario where we were able to say this is happening in our own backyard. So through that, and through, of course, other situations, that's what I do. I go around the state and I talk about these real life situations that are happening right here in Louisiana. Now, one of the things that is happening, and I don't know the frequency, but children who are aging out of foster care, they're vulnerable, and so they're easily, pulled into human trafficking because they're looking for a place to sleep, they're looking for food, they're looking to be fed, and so they're taken advantage of.
Let's just talk about, first of all, what human trafficking is, because a lot of people have an idea but are not certain. How did you come to understand what it was, and share that with us?
Well, we did make a trip to Rome, and that's when we, they showed us these women, and these women told their stories about, some were just trapped. These particular situations, these young women were asked to come and work, to find a job. And in this situation that I'm speaking of, her passport was taken from her. And so then she couldn't get it back. Similar things happen in the States where, I'll give you an example of one that happens in a school, okay, with a young girl. So there's a person on the outside who recruits a boy on the inside of high school and says, hey, I need you to help me, find a young lady that we can use, and then we can make money off of her, and then we can, fix our drug, get our drugs or whatever it is that he's trying to do. So there's a boy who gets a girl in a compromising situation. A picture is taken. The picture is used over the girl's head. If you don't, continue helping me do this, then we're gonna expose you to your parents, expose you to, the school. And of course, when you're in that situation, I mean, you can imagine, especially if you're a young person, you're scared to death. And so that's one of the things I tell people as I travel. Let's educate our kids on, look, you don't want to go down that deep, dark hole, because once you get into that, then they drug you, and then you have no idea. To hear these moms speak about this at the Capitol recently, about how they had to go save their 13-year-old daughter, unbelievable. And to know what is happening to these young girls, it is just horrendous. And so it happens to boys too. Let's not forget our boys. It's happening more and more with boys around our state. And because we have the I-10 corridor, I-20, it's a heavily trafficked area. And, when we have big events in Louisiana, whether they be in New Orleans or anywhere else, traffickers bring these young women, young girls and boys into these areas to be used. We're actually on the books right now in the whole United States. We're really cracking down through policies and really making it harder, and really coming down hard on a lot of these traffickers, and also the people who use these services, and these girls and these boys. One of the things too, want to bring up is Metanoia Manor, is where it's one of the first of the kind, where this home is built on state property. We worked really hard because these girls are under the age of 18. So typically you would have to have a parent's, sign off on things. So and some of our parents, as I mentioned, are the ones who traffic, but really working with them is the first of the kind, where the government, the faith-based, community, business are all working together to fund this program in this home where these girls are rescued. Right now, we currently have 4, but those we've had, I guess, over the last year, we've had 4. They sometimes rotate out. We have to remember when a young girl or a young boy goes through such trauma in their life, it's almost like someone coming back from a war zone. They have PTSD. They're going through this struggle mentally. It's just unbelievable that what they go through. And so some of them want to run away. They don't want, even though it's not that they want to go back to that life, they just don't know how to handle all of this emotion. We right now are doing such a good job in Louisiana of educating our law enforcement, our hospitality industry, just everybody, be alert. If you notice something that's different, or you're at McDonald's and you see a young girl or a young boy with somebody that doesn't seem like they should be, I mean, just pay attention. We all have that inner self that kind of gives us a little, question things. And right. So, depend on that sometimes and call. Everybody wants to say, oh, it's not my business. It is our business. These are our children. And so it's our business to step up and try to make a difference. We have had some percentage of increase in juveniles being trafficked over the last year. We believe that it has to do with the fact that we are doing a better job in identifying these young people and not just thinking of them as a juvenile delinquent, but thinking and asking the right questions and realizing they are being trafficked.
Mrs. Edwards, we want to thank you so much for the work that you're doing. Thank you for sharing your faith and your heart. And thank you for taking the time to share all of or a piece of what you're doing, because I'm sure that this only encompasses a small piece of the pie in the works that you are doing every day to make the state of Louisiana a better place. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. And my husband and I both are very honored and humbled to be in this position. And we feel like it is an opportunity for us to serve and give back.
Indeed. Thank you so much.
God bless.
God bless you too. Hey, everybody, stay on point.